we've got some time to ask questions. Gina, are you going to run this? Or?
Sure. We have 15 minutes, so go ahead.
What would you say to someone who said that the people that you have given as examples were the exceptions to the rule?
The question is, what would I say to the people who I often meet who say, these people are exceptions to the rules? Well, what I would say, first of all, is that I taught in a Manhattan junior high school for 30 years. In 15 years of that time, I assembled a hodgepodge of a class, and I set them to doing extraordinary things. This is one class newspaper. All of these things are going on simultaneously. Some are being done by flunk-outs, some by C students. Just look at a few of these. Here's a successful lawsuit on page 1 by a C student. At the very same time, my kids are getting more new registrations than the entire Democratic Party on the west side of Manhattan. They work for a month. We cut school for 2 days and topped their total. Here's a girl on page 2 who ended up winning an all-expenses-paid PhD at some California university, who is castigating the Central Board of Education for not teaching entrepreneurialism. Where did she get the idea to do that? She came to me and said that her mother was a liar, and her mother said she could go to Paris if she could raise the money to support herself over there. The girl's 13, mind you. She said, no 13-year-old can raise that money. I said, not with an after-school job. That's a small amount of money for a business. I said, why don't you set up a business? And she said, 13-year-olds can't set up a business. I said, if people want to buy your product, they don't care how old you are. So I taught her, cut school for a week, and she came back with the idea of making one-of-a-kind gifts using the ladies in old age homes, who, after all, were paying $4,000 or $5,000 a month on the website, using them to make one-of-a-kind art gifts, sweater, scarf, hat combination. And then she took the lady's picture, did her bio, and sold them to rich girls at Barnard College for top dollar. And through New York City, she made plenty of money. She made much more money than she needed. I said, why don't you take your mother to Paris? She made her picture there. Here is, well, go through the paper. This is 30 days of work, and this went on year after year. I came to see that the bell curve is some sort of an artifact of the way we do business. Genius and talent are as cheap as the air we breathe, and you think, well, that's an impossibly romantic thing to say, but I was one of the founders of the Conservative Party in New York State, and I was a party officer for 20 years, so I can't be accused of wild romanticism, can I? Anyway, another question, please. They're looking through the wrong lens. Yes, ma'am.
I do have a question about a graph that I've seen that separates IQ and educational level as predictors of earning power later in life. Do you know the graph that I'm talking about? So how would you explain that? Just simply discrimination by employers driving down the average for people without high school diplomas, or what is it that's going on there?
You know, I really wish we had a couple of hours. Not only is that an intelligent question, but even the one that I gave short shrift to should have gotten half an hour. There are forces at work that the conscious, rational mind is unaware of. Let me give you an example of one of those forces. You doubtless have taken standardized reading tests, correct? And yet, I could give you a simple reading test that if you did well on the standardized test, you would fail. I would ask you to read the first 20 pages of an extremely simple, famous novel, All Quiet on the Western Front. And I would ask you 3 questions, which over 15 years of administering this test, I never found a kid who scored off the top in the reading scale to be able to answer, even when finally in desperation I gave it as an open book test. And in order to derive some explanation of what was going on, it suddenly dawned on me that the better class of test reader figures out very quickly, maybe in 3rd grade, what type of information is going to be tested. And then when you read, you deliberately, without realizing it, screen out all the stuff that isn't going to be asked as a question because you've got a good sense of pattern. As a consequence, I could make a whole test out of information that's not typically asked. For example, in the first scene in the book, the German military unit at a field kitchen is eating double rations, and yet double rations are against the law, and the German army punishes infractions very severely. So how was the field cook convinced to give them double rations? I asked that question. Not a single person out of hundreds and hundreds of the best readers. And then finally I gave it as an open book. They still couldn't answer it. Well, they got double rations because the other unit who was going to eat there had been wiped out to a man. And when the cook denied them the extra sausage and potatoes, one sharp guy, the narrator of the book, says, yes, but the most severe infraction is wasting food. And when they come around and see that you've wasted half the food, your neck will be in a noose. And the cook is caught in this dilemma. And finally, well, anyway, nobody could answer the question because that's not the kind of question that's asked. Your reading has been shaped by scoring well. The only antidote is if your parents actually know how to read, and they read for nuances and for tiny detail and for connecting the dots instead of memorizing them. So these results that emerge are frequently cooked in advance. That's an expression from chess puzzles. They're predestinated, the answer, and then it can be made to seem that the results are falling one way because obviously these are superior people. Over 30 years teaching, I absolutely know that if you took all the A students and put them in a class, and you had to pick A students as a class, B, C combined, and D, F, the one class you would never select to get results are the A students, unless what you wanted were clerks and order takers. Someone else. Yes, sir.
Is there any way to like become a doctor or a lawyer without like having to go through school? Because
it's of course a wonderful question, isn't it?
Yeah, repeat the question.
You can rig the game in advance by saying you must do so-and-so on SATs, or you must do X, Y, and Z, or we won't let you on this professional track. You can do it. Are there ways to beat that? I would guess the answer is yes, but I would hardly have. But I would say by all means look and ask your local doctor, you know.